Okay. Hi, everyone. This is Juan Estrada with the latest District 5 United meeting. Thank you for joining. I do want to say happy Veterans Day. Thank you to all of you who served. So on tonight's agenda, we have uh, Captain Jason Tao with the San Jose Police Department, who will discuss the police department's efforts to address illegal sideshows, and we'll take questions and answers.
Okay, Juan, thank you very much for inviting me and having me share some of this information, because I think this is happening kind of all over the city. And again, happy Veterans Day to all of you guys out today as well. So I'm just going to go straight into this topic. Basically, we deal with sideshows or speed racing in a couple of different ways. So the first way that we deal with it is basically if you guys call from the community and you're reporting a sideshow incident, officers will be dispatched to those calls unless they're tending to other more priority calls. Usually that would mean if they're handling an injury type call or a call that involves violence. So if they're not tied up with that type of call, they would be dispatched to these sideshows. Sometimes what will happen though is we'll have smaller sideshows occur or speed racing incidences. They happen really quickly and then they take off and they move to some other portion of the city. So it causes us a little bit of complication. We do have intelligence that we follow. Some of these more organized events, usually on our swing shift and our midnight shift. What we try to do is during the overlap of those two shifts, we will pull about 10 or 15 officers off of those teams, and then we'll form what we call racer enforcement details. What happens then is generally we track the movement of the sideshow participants. Ordinarily, they'll meet somewhere, and this will be put out on social media. So they'll meet at, let's say, a staging location, and from there, they'll send out runners. So what I mean by runners are, they'll say, hey, you go out to Story and White, or you go out to Santa Teresa and Bailey and look to see if there are any cops there. So they'll send out these runners to see if there are any police officers in general areas that we know sideshow activity generally occurs. So we deploy those officers and we try to occupy those areas. So that way when those runners get there, they report back that there's police presence there, and then they go somewhere else. So if we're successful, we can kind of chase them around all night, kind of cat and mouse game, to prevent them from actually finding a location that we're not occupying. And then word of mouth, everybody will move there at one time. And so we watch the group, and as they move there, if there's any type of vehicle code violations, our officers will start making enforcement stops. This is in an effort to try to prevent them from actually taking over a intersection. If we have priority calls, I mean, we've been pretty busy on the weekends and at nights, so sometimes with staffing frustrations, it's hard to form these teams. And if a sideshow does occur, let's say a large one, this can be very problematic for us because they can be very violent as well. It's not uncommon to get reports of gunfire or other type of very violent activity. So from that point, our officers will muster up and we'll try to come in there with at least enough officers to remain safe for our staff. In the last few weeks, when the sideshows have not been frustrated with the strategy that I had just described to you, we would have to get at least 10 or 15 officers to come in and try to break up the sideshows. This has caused a lot of damage to police cars, bricks and rocks and bottles, and we've had several police cars damaged with their windshields destroyed. We have other means at our disposal. So if a sideshow does happen and there are spectators that are participating in just watching the sideshows, we are able to give them a citation. This is a $1,000 citation with a newly adopted municipal code that we had put into place about 1.5 years ago. So that's been very effective still with that. And then lastly, we do what's called vehicle seizures. So if we get to a sideshow and we're able to identify a vehicle that either participates in a sideshow, or when we try to make a vehicle stop on the vehicle, it flees, we can document this information, submit it to a judge, and ask for a vehicle seizure, which would allow us the ability to seize that vehicle. Sometimes the vehicles are in San Jose, sometimes they're in an adjoining city. We've seen vehicles as far away as North Bay, East Bay. So that becomes a little bit frustrating because we've got to send staff out there to go get those vehicles as well. But we're doing probably about 10 vehicle seizures a week. What this consists of is we impound the vehicle. The registered owner is then responsible for all the fees associated to that impound and the storage. So that's usually a 30-day impound, and fees associated to the tows. So that could be anywhere between $1,500 and $2,000. If the vehicle has modifications on it, we can make a notation for the referee, which is an inspector from the Department of Motor Vehicles, to then remove all those modifications that is making the car illegal, and then we give the car back to the registered owner. Once they get the car back, they have to bring the car into factory specifications before they're allowed to bring that car back onto the roadway. So that could be very expensive if they are heavily modified. And lastly, I just wanted to talk a little bit about DOT. We've been working and talking with them pretty extensively on trying to figure out if there are some environmental kind of equipment updates that we can put that could dissuade speeding, or maybe even prevent those donuts from happening. So those discussions are still happening. DOT has been very receptive. So we're exploring some options to see how that's going to react in certain locations throughout the city. And then lastly, we recognize that our motorcycle unit is probably not as robust as we would like it to be. So we are scheduling additional training for our patrol officers, so that way they become radar, or we call it LiDAR now. It's a different form of that technology, but it's essentially radar trained. So that way we can start enforcing speed throughout the city. So collectively we can change driving behavior. And with that, I can open it up for questions if you guys have some.
All right, there are some. So thank you for all of that information. The first question is from Lilia, who doesn't want to share audio or video, and she asks, are sideshow participants ever captured, and what are the legal consequences they face if caught?
Okay, so they are captured. There's a couple of different challenges that we do have, Lydia, is that when we go to stop a vehicle for either speeding or some sort of reckless driving event, our gauge is how much danger are we creating by trying to stop a vehicle that, let's say, flees from us. So hypothetically, we try to stop a vehicle because it's spinning donuts, and then it flees from us at a high rate of speed, 80, 90 plus miles an hour on surface streets. On something like that, we would probably not continue to chase that vehicle, because an accident could cause a fatality to that person in that car. It could cause a collision to another car, or it could cause an accident for our officers. So the danger to the community is much greater than the actual donuts that are spinning in that scenario. So as I discussed a little bit earlier, if we're able to get a license plate, then we follow up with that registered owner, and then they are accountable for some of those fees involved. With the actual citation or arrest of the driver, we have to prove, beyond all reasonable doubt who was driving it. So that would pend for an investigation. In another scenario, if we stop the car and the person does stop, we would issue them a citation, and they would have to pay fees and penalties. So I hope that answers that question.
All right, thank you. And the next question is from Eric Gata. And I'm sorry, I should have, let me ask Lilia's other question, and then Eric, I'll turn on your audio and video. So Lily asks, why do you think sideshows have become prevalent? For a while, these have been happening on the corner of White Road and Story Road for a duration of 30 minutes or so.
Well, I have a couple of theories why they're prevalent. I think that cars and young people, that's not new. It's been here for a long time. Generationally, it kind of transforms differently. Now we're into more of the drifting, the donuts. I think it's been somewhat glamorized with some movies. I'm sure you guys are familiar with the movies where they do some of these type of driving behaviors. Another opinion of mine is that I think that with the virus, there's a lack of other positive things to do, and people just, this is a kind of a social gathering. It's almost, we were talking about this in staff today, it's almost like a social function. And at some point, it almost sounds and seems like these groups of people welcome police presence. So when we have our helicopter up above to monitor it from a distance, and we have officers starting to respond with lights and sirens, it almost sometimes excites these folks that are involved in this type of activity. So I think those are a couple of reasons that I, from my experience, can see. So I don't know. This is a really hypothetical question, though. So I hope I answered that fully enough.
All right, thank you. So Eric noted that he prefers not to share audio and video. I think they like for me to ask questions. So the next question is, what is being done to improve response time? First one was 35 minutes. Second one was 40 minutes, Story and White.
Okay, there is really no simple answer for this one. We have a protocol on how we send officers out. You guys probably have known that we are probably the thinnest ratio staffed police department in the nation. And so we have a little bit less than 1,000 officers. We have a little bit more than 1 million people. Our city has a tremendous amount of needs, and we have to prioritize those needs. And this is how we do it. If we have a call for service where somebody's being violently accosted, or we have a call for service where somebody is injured, those calls take priority. And I know that when we talk about these sideshows, these are very dangerous events, but if there is no violence, in other words, somebody's not violently attacking somebody else where injury is happening, or if nobody's injured at the moment, we handle those injury and violence calls first, and then we handle non-injury, non-violent calls after. If we have an incident like we had last night, we had a shooting and resulted in a homicide, we end up having to use staff to deal with that event, and that will take away from police services. We tend to shift staffing around from other parts of the city to make sure that we properly maintain safety for the entire city with that type of dispatching hierarchy in place. So if it's a busy night, which it has been very busy recently, if you guys follow some of our social media, our response times will suffer on the calls that are non-violent and non-injury.
All right, Eric had another question. What about safety? We have a direct view of Story and White. When police come, they all exit down Story heading toward Fleming. They run stop signs and drive on the wrong side of the road.
Yeah, and I think I kind of covered it earlier, but again, if we try to stop vehicles and they don't stop and it creates more of a danger trying to stop them, we're not going to continue to pursue them. We'll try to explore other avenues of enforcement investigation later. Let me back it up to our strategy. So normally when we do our racer enforcement detail strategy, we tend to do this cat and mouse game all over the city. So when it happens at a certain intersection and people call it in, and then they're kind of frustrated because now it's moved somewhere else. Well, I just want you guys to know we are moving with it. So please continue to call in because we're dealing with this all over the city. And if we're able to do this strategy correctly, you guys will never see or hear anything about it. And this happens more than you guys know successfully. But when we do have staffing issues because of call volume or other things come up where officers become unavailable to deploy this strategy, then I think that's the nights that you guys see some of this activity. I know that when we had planned for social unrest or civil unrest during the voting, that was when we saw a lot of peak of racer type activity. These people are very smart, cunning young people, and they knew that our staffing was going to be very thin that day due to our preparation for what was possibly about to happen. So that's kind of a demonstration of what I'm talking about. When we don't have the proper amount of staff available, then that's when you're going to see this type of activity a little bit more often.
All right, Norma, you can share your audio and video if you'd like. I'll give it a few seconds.
Okay. I don't have a video, but I do have voice. My question is, what can we do to install more cameras? And also, why isn't some type of consequence as far as impounding their car for a month or two to discourage these kids? And some of them aren't kids, they're adults that need their cars to get to and from work. Impounding those cars for a long period of time might discourage them.
Yeah, I agree with you, Norma. I think if it were up to me, we'd impound them forever. But we can only do as much as the law will allow, and we do impound for 30 days when they do this type of activity and when we do get the vehicle seizures. So I agree with you wholeheartedly. It is a fine balance on trying to stop people with a very fast car that are causing a lot of danger to the community if they don't stop. And so again, I kind of revert back to what I was explaining before. In history of policing, when I first started, we wouldn't ever discontinue a police pursuit. And as time went on and our industry kind of evolved with the demands of society, people said it's not reasonable that we just chase somebody for vehicle pursuit that ends up into a fatality, regardless if they're burning donuts or if they're even speed racing each other. It doesn't, I guess the benefit to society, even though I understand this is a major nuisance, is still something that we have to weigh in on. And so when people don't stop in a car, we're not going to chase them and cause more danger. So we do have those other avenues, as I had discussed, with the vehicle impounds. And also, if they do stop, we do tow their cars and we do give them tickets. And that is pretty much the extent of the law that we have right now.
All right, and I personally support discontinuing pursuits so that people aren't at risk. Richard Vega, you could share your audio and video if you'd like. I'll give it a few seconds.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I'll share my audio. I don't have video here. My question was: is there a possibility of shifting resources, given the limited resources? Is there a possibility of shifting resources for a limited period of time to address the uptick? And the second part to that question: is there an area of the city that isn't seeing this problem, and is there some reason why? Maybe a law enforcement issue, maybe a community issue that isn't seeing the problem that's identifiable?
Both very good questions. So shifting resources. So we know certain nights based on intelligence, different ways that we gather intelligence to predict where these sideshows are going to occur. These usually happen just a few hours before the actual event actually happens. So we had considered having a team come in, a dedicated team that we wouldn't have to kind of rob Peter to pay Paul type of thing. That wasn't utilized for community 911 calls for service. The problem with that is to bring in 10 or 15 officers on their day off is very expensive for the city. And if no activity such as that occurs, these officers really, they don't have a lot of purpose. They can go and conduct, car stops randomly, but what we found was that the expense of bringing a team in, let's say every Friday, every Saturday night, was very expensive. So as an alternative, that's when we use the overlap, when we have a 3-hour overlap between our swing shift and our midnight shift. If call volume allows us to do so, we form these teams and we utilize the strategy I had explained earlier. To your second point, we see areas of the city that are more prone to sideshow activity because of the actual layout of that area. Some of them are in very remote areas where it's kind of on the outskirts of city limits. Some of them, the intersections are rather large and not well traveled through. So there's different reasons why we see certain areas, but mostly they're in the areas that are not heavily condensed, because this allows for more time for them to take off. If people start, calling PD, and it takes PD a little bit longer to come from the main areas of the either district or the city to address the problem. So I'm seeing more of that kind of on the outskirts of certain districts and on intersections that are bigger.
All right, next question. Judy Kennedy, could you share your audio and video? I'll give it a, oh, no, I'm sorry. She just said no audio or video. So there's constant racing and worrying on Clayton, Story, Fleming, and Meadow Lane all hours of day and night. How about cameras, speed bumps, roundabouts?
I think all of those are good. The cameras, they would have to be what we call LPR cameras. They're called license plate readers. When cars move and they have a very reflective plate, it's very hard to capture these images. Sometimes if you don't use the correct camera system, the actual license plate will be digitized, so you won't be able to read it. So the LPR, license plate reader camera technology, has a way to stabilize that image, and that way we can get very still, readable images. Many of these LPRs are linked up to databases where we can track movement of cars. Some people don't like this type of technology. It's not cheap, I will say. So that is a possibility. We do have some LPR capabilities. Most of those LPRs are embedded in certain devices that we can put kind of randomly throughout the city. The problem with, I think, some of the LPRs is that it doesn't, it's not queryable. So for example, if we deployed an LPR camera, we couldn't just query the actual, let's say, date and time. It actually, I don't know how to explain this so it makes sense, but it kind of categorizes the license plate. So you almost would have to get the license plate to be able to find out where you see the vehicle. So that is one possibility. I like that possibility. Those LPRs are not cheap though. The other ones that you talked about with the roundabouts and the speed bumps, those are actually under the purview of the Department of Transportation. So we have been talking about They call them road dots. I don't know if you've ever seen those. If you guys go to Santana Row, sometimes, excuse me, they're used as road delineators. So you'll see like a round dot. I don't know, it's yellow. Some of them are 6-inch diameter, some of them are 8-inch diameters. They're kind of round shape, almost like the back of a turtle. They do come in an 8-inch diameter that has a 2 or 3-inch height. So when you hit these road dots, if you were to hit them at 30 miles an hour, 35 miles an hour, you would literally destroy your car. So they are used as delineators, and they're not used as speed bumps. We talked to another county that used them in a really rural intersection, and it doesn't look like these would really work for our application. To put a, I don't know what it would cost to put a roundabout in every single intersection that this is occurring. That would be probably a discussion with DOT. I know that we did talk about putting certain things in certain locations, and then obviously that activity would just move to another location. And so that neighborhood, of course, would be really happy that they got rid of that activity because of a roundabout or other devices. But then let's say it moves 2 blocks over, how would we address that? And what's the sustainability of that? So it's kind of like a bucket of water, if you move the bucket, the water is going to shift to the other side. And so that's why, in my opinion, I used to work motorcycle units several years ago, and I think driving behavior is changed more quickly if you can write and give tickets to people for reckless driving or speeding or other traffic infractions, because tickets are very expensive nowadays. And that's why we're hoping to get more of our officers trained on traffic enforcement with radar and kind of hit that in a different strategy. If we can get people driving reckless throughout the day, these are probably the same people that are driving reckless in the evening and on the weekends. So we're moving that direction on the PD side, and we are still having very good discussions with DOT. I know they're very interested in trying to figure out some devices that can help. We're just not there yet.
All right, final question from Trudy Ellerbett. Indirectly related, what is the status of the shot spotter technology?
Okay, indirectly, so shot spotter is a technology that it could have several different things, but I'll just talk about the basic shot spot device. Is basically a listening device, and they're planted throughout certain segments of cities. They're primarily put in areas where we have we call them hot spots, where there's more shootings that occur. When the shot spot detects gunfire, even before the dispatcher can receive a call, talk to that person, make up the event, assign an officer, that could take anywhere between 1 to 2 minutes to go through that process. The shot spotter technology would route that information directly to the officers, and they could immediately start moving that direction. Some cities have the shot spotter technology intertwined with other technologies that they use. So for example, New York City, they have shot spotter, they have traffic cameras or surveillance cameras, whatever you want to call them, throughout the city. And what will happen is if a shot comes out here, all these cameras kind of move and they point to the area of that shooting. So that increases their likelihood of catching an image of, let's say, a vehicle speeding out of the area, or an image of, let's say, potential suspects, if that camera happens to be literally right there. So that's an example of shot spotter. It's been used in several different cities. I know we are talking about deploying this technology here. It is so advanced that it would be able to tell you the caliber of the gun as well. So obviously, if we can eliminate that delay, officers that just happen to be right there in the area would be equipped with that information instantaneously, and they'll be able to kind of be on high alert if they see kind of a suspicious vehicle or a vehicle leaving at a high rate of speed away from there before that call comes out. That increases our likelihood of apprehension.
All right. Thank you, Captain Tom, for making time for this important topic. I know there's a lot of concern because it is usually really late at night when they do it, I think is part of the reason. And so, again, thank you for making time. We appreciate that you always make time for us. We appreciate all of your efforts.
Great. Thank you, guys. And I'll update you guys next month. And hopefully I get some radar trained officers. And I think that will make at least a dent in some of this driving behavior.
And did I understand
guys have a great
correctly? Are
evening.
you a motorcycle rider?
I used to be in my younger days.
All right. Cool.
In 2013 to 2016, I was the commander of the motorcycle unit. It was
All right.
we had a lot of work. I mean, traffic is a big deal here, so I totally understand the frustration. I wish we had the ability to do much more enforcement, and so I'm hoping to lean that direction. I talked to my boss today, Deputy Chief Randall, and I stressed to her the importance of getting citywide, more of our officers trained on radar enforcement so we can start reducing speed and getting more tickets out there, because I really do think that $1,000 speeding ticket with some associated traffic school and a hike in insurance is going to change some driving behavior.
All right.
You
Okay.
guys
All
have a
right.
great night.
Yeah. Thank you.